Hey there, my name is Laís de Oliveira, and I'm going to be guiding you through hacking communities. Basically, all my life has been about building communities even though I was not aware about it. I've had experience building communities from Latin America to Southeast Asia. In Latin America, by the hands of NXTB Labs, the first and one of the main accelerators in there, and later on, Startup Grind Buenos Aires, which I have started. Later in 2014, I've moved to Malaysia and I started Startup Grind Kuala Lumpur, and I've also worked for the Malaysian Global Innovation and Creativity Center as a community ambassador, meaning I was connecting grassroots community builders to the MAGIC programs, so the Malaysian government programs for entrepreneurs. Also, I was the director for Asia, Pacific, and Africa for Startup Grind headquarters, helping them select and train local community builders. Eventually, I started a company called 8space.co, which was a result of me trying to capitalize on the community that I had started in Malaysia, and it got acquired by flyspaces.com, which is currently the largest marketplace for office space and workspaces in Southeast Asia. So, we're going to be covering a little bit about the science and the art of belonging in here. And we're going to be having about 30 minutes of a lot of me talking and slides, so feel free to break it in 2 or 3 parts if you feel like. But just make sure to watch it to the end and give me some feedback, especially if you have a community that you're currently building and you know about the topic. Very glad to have you here, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you very much. So here we're going to be talking about hacking communities in a nutshell. So when we talk about hacking communities, the key is about understanding the power of grassroots communities and abundance-minded communities for a better world, for better profit, and for a better ecosystem where individuals and companies can thrive. And we're talking about it being grassroots, which means it grows organically like nature grows, and abundance-minded where every individual feels the benefit of sharing and helping each other. Let's take a close look at a case where having an abundant-minded community made the world some good. And that case is San Francisco, which according to Saxenian and Elias Saxenian, quoted by Brett Feld in his book Startup Communities, that culture of openness and information exchange was one of the main factors to turn Silicon Valley into what it has become. And you can see that it has sprouted its small versions of Silicon Valley all around the world, changing the culture of technology, and revolutionizing many of the ways how we see the world and how we interact between each other today. But I know, we're tired to talk about Silicon Valley as the key example of a tech ecosystem which is thriving and successful. So let's look into another place, a little bit more critical. So Argentina, for those who are aware and know it a little bit, is that country mentioned by Inc. magazine many times as the toughest business climate in the world, due to corruption, inflation, tough regulation, and not that different from Brazil. And I also lived in Argentina for 4 years, so I have seen it closely that besides the crisis, it's also home to majority of Latin America's tech unicorns, such as Mercado Libre, Despegar.com, OLX, and Global, and many others around. So how is that the toughest business climate in the world is also home to the largest tech companies in Latin America? So I saw this presentation by Endeavor, and they were very nice to share it with me so that I can use it here as an example about how did the tech sector in Argentina look like in 96 versus 2011. So let's take a look again. This is what it would have been without the intervention of Endeavor. So Endeavor, the organization which gave me the data, if you are aware, basically they are an ecosystem builder. They help startups, companies by selecting high-impact entrepreneurs and offering them mentoring, networks, and support through networks mostly. So you can see the size of the circles in here are defined by the amount of interactions going in between these companies. And here you can see the Endeavor entrepreneurs in green, and the interaction between them, even if Endeavor and non-Endeavor entrepreneurs, is extremely dense. Whereas if Endeavor did not exist, this is what the scenario would have looked like. Of course, many of these companies may have existed, but the main difference here is the interaction in between them. And many companies from Endeavor, many of these former employees have founded new companies, have founded accelerators, have founded incubators, and have supported the local ecosystem, making Argentina one of the most relevant tech ecosystems in Latin America and in the world as well. So, remembering Brad Feld again, network effects operate in systems where individuals basically see the benefit of sharing, see the benefit of sharing information and of thinking abundantly. So the idea we are going to work in here is how to start these ecosystems from scratch, or how to seed that seed of abundance in our ecosystems, turning this from centralized, where maybe we are the only ones speaking and giving talks and hosting events, or we have a co-working space, but we're centralizing of the information. How can we go from centralized or sometimes decentralized, which are not stable? If you can picture a bomb falling in either of these systems, it would destroy all the information available or the information partially. Whereas in a distributed system, that information would simply flow freely from all its members, and makes it a more sustainable ecosystem. Defining hacking communities again, it's about the process of how to getting it done, how to building a more interconnected ecosystem. And we're going to go through two parts for this today. We're going to talk a little bit about the science, about how and why we humans belong, and then we're going to talk about the art, where I bring most of my experience into explaining how do we belong, how to make it happen, and what do we need to do. So if you're ready, let's get into it. Alright, so if you're a nerd like me, let's take a quick look on the brief history of communities, and if you're not a nerd, just hold on for 2 minutes. So we're going to explore why did we survive as a species. And according to the historian and author of *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari, humans did not survive because we had amazing technology in our hands. Like we don't have very, very sharp claws or teeth or very thick skin, but we were able to survive thanks to communities. So what makes us different from other animals is in the collective level. In fact, we likely survived because we were living together, and our ancestors who decided to fight a lion with their bare hands or live alone through harsh weathers probably did not leave any descendants to tell the story. So belonging essentially feels safe, and that feels good, and belonging feels good in a very simple syllogism like Socrates would like. So, Susan Pinker, a psychologist and author of a book called The Village Effect, goes further into saying that it is a biological imperative to know that we belong, and it can impact longevity. So Susan Pinker is famous for a study that she did in areas called blue zones, where people live beyond 100 years above average. So she went there and tried to identify what did they do different than us. And it was not necessarily in their diet or in their habits or in the fact they were doing yoga and having kale smoothies, but the fact they had in-person interaction with their neighbors, with the people in their city, in their village, even though maybe their daughters and their sons, their first degree family ties were not necessarily close by them, but they were close to the community. So these in-person interactions send feel-good hormones through our bloodstream, which can impact how long we live. So we lived long and prospered because we belong. Well, and while belonging still matters, since we have the same technology in terms of our operational system as humans as we did 10,000 years ago, the environment has changed. We're more mobile and more connected, and we're free to belong anywhere. Yet, we are connected through things like memes, which, on the good side, are funny and they help us connect beyond barriers, and it's just little reminders of humanity that are funny and they're relatable all across the world. But we're also the loneliest generation. Just in January of this year, in the UK, it was announced that they had started the Ministry for Loneliness. And that's no laughing matter because loneliness kills. According to Susan Pinker on the same book, The Village Effect, loneliness drives up cortisol and blood pressure levels, which can, of course, shorten our lives. And she goes further, mentioning the study by neuroscientist Elizabeth Rudd Kay from the University of Maryland, which says that interactions offline still matter to develop the areas of our brain related with attention, social intelligence, and emotional reward. Simply making eye contact or giving someone a high five can increase our levels of trust with that person and also make us feel better because that releases more oxytocin, the hormone known as the spoon hormone, if you want to know. But mostly, it's a hormone mostly activated by touch and responsible for the bonding between mother and children, and of course the bonding between humans in general. Long story short, offline connections still matter. And while we are free to belong anywhere, it is important that we learn how to build new connections within more diverse communities. We don't need to look alike or to be from the same place anymore to belong together, but we still need reasons to high five each other and to trust each other in order to feel good and healthier and live healthier lives. Finally, it's not about creating a context where you own people or you own a huge database. That's not community building. It's about creating a context of safety where you don't tell your community members, I got you, but I got your back. So now we're headed to part 2 about the art of building communities and the art of storytelling. So I'm gonna start by asking, what do communities and sci-fi have in common? And I might give you 3 seconds to think about it, but I'm gonna break the news this time. It's about fictional realities. According to Harari, the same author we talked about before, the reason why we are different from other animals is also that we don't use language only to describe, but also to create new realities. And as long as everybody believes in that reality, we act in a certain way. We follow rules and we follow a predictable behavior. So, in a way, fiction or a shared belief guides our values, essentially guiding our decisions, which define our actions. And all of that together can be called our culture. So basically, we're talking about culture as in when people have an expected behavior parting from a deeply ingrained values coming from a core belief, such as I'm gonna wash the dishes if I believe that it is important to keep it clean for everybody and that everybody collaborating will keep it a healthier space for us to work and live together. The same about people not littering on the streets or not throwing garbage on the streets when they believe that the future is important and that they must care for sustainability for future generations. So when you're able to drive action from a shared belief and you're able to create culture, that basically means less time spent on micromanagement and less money spent on advertising. According to Paul Graham's Y Combinator, the culture in their case was not just part of the organization, it was the product, and it was the reason why Y Combinator was one of the most successful accelerators in the world. Now, how do you build culture? You must start from the why, building a golden circle, similar to what Simon Sinek explained, and he loves to give the example of Apple, in which Apple is a company that did not communicate from the what, but from the why. While most of the companies would say, we sell computers, we sell machines, they would say, we enable and empower creatives to think different. How? We build beautifully designed machines, and what we do? Oh yeah, we do computers. According to Simon Sinek, the goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. So when you talk about fiction, we're not talking about making up something, creating a story. We're talking about finding people who believe what you believe and selling to them. So here I'm going to give a more concrete example on how to do it. So Hubba Thailand is one of the most successful co-working spaces in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. Now what you see here in this building is just a co-working space. It has walls, it's a house, and it has desks, and it has Wi-Fi, and basically no desk is different from another. They basically do the same thing. But well, how Hubba runs its business? Well, they do lots of events and they host a lot of people. They help connect these people between each other, and they are enthusiastic about what they do. As you can see, one of the founders is here on the floor holding the mic. But the most important is why they do it. They basically have built an interconnected network in Thailand where it is the doorway to Southeast Asia, to and from Thailand, whereas anyone willing to get into the Thai startup ecosystem would get to talk to one of Hubba founders or to their staff, and they would go work from Hubba to get connected in order to belong to Southeast Asia's startup ecosystem. So these complex networks are what make Hubba different, and this is why they do it, to connect startups and to power entrepreneurs from Thailand to Southeast Asia. Now, it's important that you find your core in order to communicate from it. And so many companies have got so used to communicating from their what that it's hard sometimes to remember what is our why as an ecosystem builder, as government, or as a company. And one advice coming from Brené Brown, the author of a book called Daring Greatly, is that you show yourself authentically. Basically, there cannot be belonging without you accepting yourself as who you really are and speaking your truth authentically. Or how Regina George would say, Stop trying to be cool because it's not gonna happen. People notice when you're not authentic, and authenticity basically builds efficiency. When you are your most authentic self, you build on your own energy instead of trying to waste time and energy being something that you are not. And back to why it matters. According to the author of a book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team and also a consultant of Table Group, Patrick Lencioni, core values must be ingrained through every single aspect of your organization. And the best example I have in here is Startup Grind. And why and how did they grow to 400 cities, 120 countries, and over 1,500,000 entrepreneurs all over the world? It's because they took seriously the idea of hiring, rewarding, and firing people according to their values of giving more than taking, making friends more than contacts, helping each other, not just helping yourself. And I know for having been part of the HQ and selecting people and observing Derek Anderson, the founder, closely on how he would engage, he would be a person who would rather trust people a lot, and naturally, people who would not align with the values in the long term would fall apart. But Derek knew exactly the importance of values, and he would make sure in every interview, in every aspect of measuring performance and rewarding and recognizing people for their efforts, he would highlight the idea of living by the values, of living abundantly. And many organizations maybe neglect the importance of having strong values. Okay, so we're getting closer to the exciting part, which is getting it done. Let's talk first about community dimensions. What I call dimensions are basically where are the communities getting started from. So I'd advise you to think about your case so that we can think about it in practice. Either you are starting from a physical place, from an idea or abstract cause, or from a product. And we're going to give examples of each later on. And these communities can be either internal, such as a team, your organizational culture, some invite-only group, or external, such as followers, attendees, fan base, customer base. So let's take a look into product-based communities. Here I have Apple from the 80s, something like building a brand where people feel identified with and they feel unique by buying that brand, like we, the ones who think differently, we, the creatives. Or Airbnb, which basically builds trust among strangers just from its brand and make us feel cooler when we travel and use Airbnb instead of a hotel. And further on, AWS, Amazon Web Services, where their salespeople normally don't sell directly and spam people on AWS products, but they gather the local crowd of developers, engineers, and they make these guys speak to each other. They put up events where the local developers are the speakers and they share knowledge instead of selling AWS. But by sharing their knowledge, it is implicit that they have been using AWS as their server to support their architecture and so on. So it's bringing the community to speak on your behalf, on behalf of your product. So the other great example is about communities around an idea. Well, you can think about vegans or people who attend Comic-Cons dressing up as a cosplay. You can see here the Iron Man hanging out with Kylo Ren and the Black Widow, even though they're not even part of the same universe, but they're all feeling like they belong together. Or you can think about girls who like shopping and believe in the power of brands to represent them, in which if I wear Prada and you wear Gucci and some of our friends is wearing another renowned brand, we belong to each other and we trust each other. So these are communities around abstract ideas. That could be a cause, a liking, an interest, or even a brand. Or in this case, more the idea of belonging to several brands together. And finally, communities attached to a place, such as that single origin, best roast in town coffee shop, where you can find hipsters and people hanging out with their nice hoodies, and you can feel like in there you can ask for someone to check on your computer while you go to the toilet and nothing's gonna happen to it. Or you can think about the skater bowls, where surf breaks, where people just by hanging out in there, they feel like they belong together and they are friends and they trust each other. Or art galleries, which attract a niche crowd of people who appreciate art and make them feel special for sharing that liking and that special taste. So next, and getting closer to the grounds and to practice, let's think about the 4 steps to serendipity, or the 4 steps and successful strategies to build communities. First, who's in? most obviously, personal creation is fundamental to building communities. And there's even a chicken and egg situation in which maybe you should do it at the same time you're doing your golden circle, identifying your why, your how, and your what. But it's important, most definitely, to know your why and your purpose before you know who to attract, and both will help each other. Say you're trying to attract entrepreneurs who are established and who have raised money because you want them to interact, learning with each other, and attract talent to make them hire the best talent in town and also retain the best talent in your country. First of all, it's very important that you choose relevant channels to keep your first members relevant. And you can do that by making friends with other community builders, sending personal invites, but it's very important that you group from a very consistent base and that you'll be inclusive as you are exclusive. There's a myth about community building being all inclusive, and it is as long as the people who are included are relevant. So in a community of founders only, it's very important that you keep it relevant for everyone, and that implies being exclusive and letting people go either when they do not align with your values or when they are not adding value to each other, so that you keep the sustainability of your community guaranteed to all of its members. The other aspect of it is engineering serendipity itself, the second step, in which basically my main inspiration is Y Combinator, when they explain that the main point of YC is the culture, where most founders say that they had the most productive period of their lives while participating in their program, which inspired us as well to build the program and the cultural engineering in the Magic Accelerator program. So we managed to incite a culture of growth where startups were willing to report their growth and ask for each other to grow as well. So how can we engineer it? I basically think as in people in the same way as molecules, and the more frequent we have interactions, the more likely there will be a successful one. The more constantly we meet each other, the more likely there will be successful reactions. So how can we engineer enough interactions so that we get people out of their inertia or out of their normal state where they do not interact with different people into a state where we mix people with a certain mindset with our ideal mindset until they start changing each other, bringing them to a mindset shift. Such as if we have a crowd of or a mass of people who are scarcity minded, how can we mix them with a niche of people who are abundant minded into thinking differently, into starting to think more collaboratively, more abundantly, and to believe in each other, and that collaboration can drive us all further. And finally, how to do that? Well, through creation of content or the turkey, like how I learned from Hugh Mason, a great friend and CEO of JFDI, one of the main accelerators in Southeast Asia, also part of the Global Accelerator Network. So community building for him is like the turkey in the Thanksgiving dinner. People get together because of the turkey, but what really matters are the conversations around the table. So all we have to do is create these excuses to bring people together, knowing that the type of content we choose will define the type of people we bring to the room. And knowing also that more important than bringing people to the room is making sure they have a reason to come back. So bring people to attend a great event in an empty building will be amazing, but it won't guarantee they will come back on their own in the next weekend. Whereas if you organize a great event in a beautiful place with colorful places, coffee shops, bars, it's very likely they will be willing to come back on their own next week and bring friends together. So I divide this in a 3-stage funnel, which I call attract, engage, and stay, in which your goal is to build lighthouses, where everyone interested in a certain topic knows you are the go-to person about that. Like Hubba is the go-to co-working space for people who want to expand their businesses from Thailand to Southeast Asia or the other way around. Then your goal is to build an excuse for people to come back for, a place they want to recurrently visit, like a local pub, a coffee shop, the best boutique in town, a workshop series, anything that gives them a reason to stay engaged with you. And finally, your goal is to make them stay, make them take their shoes off and feel like they know you, they are your friends, and then they become part of your community to stay. Most importantly, cadence matters. For you to build a community, you must recurrently organize these events and think about who you are attracting so that people keep coming to your event consistently, they keep meeting, they keep having encounters through these activities. And this can be online or offline. By content, I mean any sort of excuse to bring people together. Anything that brings people in, gives them a reason to come back, and makes them want to stay. With that in mind, I'd like you to think about your ecosystem's monthly digest and think about, do you have enough events which are varied enough, bringing in different crowds of people, not only to come in separate niches, but also to interact with each other. Finally, last but not least, space matters. So let's do a test. How do you feel like acting in this environment here? Would you feel like putting your feet on the table? And what about in this one? Would you feel like lying down on the floor if you wanted to? Would you speak louder in this place than in the previous one? That goes to demonstrate that design inspires action, and in a similar way, you can inspire your crowd to act in a certain way when you design a space for an event, or even a co-working space or an office space. So, of course, in a dirty burger joint, people feel more likely to share ideas and speak out loud and laugh and be more at ease, whereas in a very fancy restaurant, we would control ourselves a bit, speak quietly, and try to be as classy as we can. So, of course, I'm putting here extremes, but what are you most likely to be like? Do you want to be a burger joint? Do you want to be a classy restaurant? Do you want to be like Hubud in Bali, or do you want to be like Regis in the Philippines? And finally, heading towards the end, letting it grow, the ultimate art. And some people say that community building has no consistency or no clear impact. And that's because some people just don't know how to measure it. And my biggest advice is that you go from your why, from your highest vision of impact, down to your measures which are closer to your how and to your what. And here I have a diagram example of how from your why you have your vision, your idea of impact, down to your measures of success, which are the numbers which are closest to that vision, then down to milestones, which are more qualitative ways of measuring success, and down to KPIs, which would be key performance indicators. You may use other type of measures, but the essence is that you go from on a cause and effect logic from the lowest to the highest impact. And here I have an example of hacking communities itself, from the goal of better communities for people to live longer and prosper, to the measures of success of the number of people impacted, to a milestone of a next number of hacked communities across all continents and galaxies, to the what, which is the closest to our operations, which is the number of people connected to our content and workshops, which basically would impact in the number of hacked communities and the number of people impacted, and finally to happier people living through better communities. And finally, the golden advice would be to control what you can and release the rest. You can control the content, the space design, location, price, and other things you should let go, to let grow. Organicity, in a way, is growing like nature grows, and if you observe the patterns of nature, where it grows repeating the very same pattern from very small to larger and to even larger, but always repeating patterns from small to large, like fractals, which resemble uncannily artistic batik made by man. So a fractal is basically a map of a chaotic system. And if you think of one community as a chaotic system, your goal is to replicate these communities in higher and higher scale over time. And similarly to how a network of neurons expands into an internet network, you can think of you establishing a ripple effect from micro to macro. And finally, the secret recipe is to start from the core. Start from some strong seed and let it fly. Like dandelions would spread and grow even where they are not wanted, in the sidewalks, through the cracks, you are able to establish a strong core, a strong vision, a strong sense of belonging, spread it through people and let it grow where it finds a fertile land and where it finds a suitable ecosystem. If you want to stay in touch with me, I know this has been a little bit hurried Please do. I'm posting more content and more details about each of these diagrams I've shared here at hackingcommunities.com, and also more information about the authors I have quoted. And finally, if you want to have more information about how to design your own content plan in order to attract the right people, or how to engineer serendipity through content creation, I'll be very happy to share more with you. Hope to stay in touch, and thank you for being here with me. Hello again. If you're watching this, it means you did not fall asleep, and I'm very glad you didn't. Thank you for resisting all the way through, and I would love to hear about what kind of community you're building. So if you want, do get in touch, and I can help you with my knowledge, or maybe connect you with someone who can help you grow a large worldwide grassroots community. Thank you very much for watching, and stay in touch.